Hey guys, welcome back. We had a couple of questions recently in a live stream and in my Facebook group about ShopStream Connect and what we can do with that software to make our captures look a little better. So today I'm going to walk you through that process. Now, if you don't have the software, I'm going to put a link down below, or you can just Google ShopStream Connect Snap-on. It'll take you to the page. You can download it. You will have to fill out a little bit of information, and then you'll get that software installed, and it works with a whole bunch of different Snap-on scan tools from the very old to the current. So once we have that software installed, we need to connect our scan tool to the computer. Now, there's a setting we have to turn on in our scan tool in order to do that. So let me jump over to my Modis and I'll show you that. So on my Modis, in order to be able to connect this to the computer, we need to prep it by selecting a setting called Connect to PC. Now, let me show you a reason why you'd want to do this to begin with. So now not only can you revisit some of the LabScope captures you've recorded and saved, you can also view scanner data that you've saved. So I don't think I have any scope captures saved on my Modis, but if I go into my previous vehicles and data, go to View Saved Data. Now it says showing 50 newest of 356 files. So there's a lot of stuff on here. It takes a little bit to load. Even if I did have a scope capture on here, I may not be able to access it without plugging it into the computer because it might be past that 50 item limit. So let me scroll down here. All the ones that say XML, that's just my code reports. The BMP is when I took a screenshot. SCM is I believe that's scanner movie. So this is where I had a bunch of data pits going. I was recording as I was driving, and then at some point I reached up and I pressed the save button at the top of the screen. Now this is for a case study I'm working on. So it has a whole bunch of information. I think I may have just gone to the default, engine data pit list on this one after I was done with it, just to capture more information. But I can view this in a graph form and I can see 4 graphs at a time, but I can't really manipulate this data and shrink down to just the data pits I want. I can do that if I go and load this on a computer and use this for ShopStream Connect. So I don't see any scope files in here, but there might be some in there. We just have to hook it up to the computer to retrieve them. So I'm going to go back to the home page and we're going to select Tools, Connect to PC. Device is now in Connect to PC mode. And then we need a USB cable, and we're going to plug this USB cable in to the top of the scan tool. If we jump over to the ShopStream Connect software, now this computer is fairly fast and the Modis is pretty fast as well. Some of the older ones like my Vantage, it takes a while for the computer to load it up, but it pops up this screen, and even if you have ShopStream Connect closed, as soon as you plug in the scan tool, it'll automatically open ShopStream Connect. It just takes a second, so be patient. But now we see that over here on the left side of the screen is my drive list, and at the very bottom it says Modis Edge. Now it's already selected, and this is all of the files in my Modis Edge. I mean, there's quite a few here because I never remove them from my scan tool. It'd probably run a little faster if I did. So I'm just going to scroll through here, see if there's any of the scope files I was looking for. And it looks like here's one. Oh, there we go. It's called, the file type is a VSM. I think that's the scope file. So I'm going to double click on that and open it up. And now it looks like we have possibly a cam sensor, crank sensor correlation. Now it looks like maybe I didn't use a high enough sample rate on this capture because we're zoomed all the way in. We see some rounded corners on these waveforms. Let me zoom out so I can. Now if you're looking at this screen and saying, hey, that looks just like the scope on the scan tool, it's very, very similar. And a lot of the functions are the same. I can't obviously change the settings, but I can open up the setting menu to see what my settings were. I can see what my time base was, which has 100 milliseconds. If I shrink it and open it again, sometimes it'll give you this information, sometimes it doesn't. But if I put some cursors out up here at the top, show my cursors, I can move those around. It's going to update the information right where my head is for the cursor information. So we have what the voltage is at that cursor and what the difference between cursor number 1, cursor number 2 is. And then down here at the bottom, we have a time measurement for those cursors. And then also it calculates our frequency. And it looks like, because I have such a wide span of time, our frequency is very, very low. Difference of 20,000 milliseconds. But either way, we have some flexibility. If I had a glitch in this image right here, and I wanted to print it out or save it for the customer, I can print it out here. And I'm not sure if there's an option to go to day mode in this. Let me see. Invert colors. And that way when you print it, it doesn't take up a whole bunch of ink. Or if you wanted to save a bunch of images for a case study that you were going to print out some workbooks to go with as well. If you do this, you can invert the colors. Now this screen looks a little more, like a picoscope. Let me go back here to our view again. Go back to night mode. It's a little easier on the eyes, especially when watching these videos. We can turn off and on the grid. We can change it. We can separate our channels into separate channels, and you can do this in the scope. I'm not sure if you can do it on the Modis, but the Virus and the Zeus, you should be able to. Let me hide my cursors again. If we were running more than 2 channels, if I had a capture from my Zeus or the Virus or the older Modis, then you could display these in a different way as well. The 3 and the 4 window option is grayed out, but we can also view these side by side. I prefer normally to run them in the same window, but it's a preference thing. Now, if you did want to print this, I know I said it'll print the black, but I believe if you print it, it'll print it on a white background. If we hit print, would you like to save ink by printing only the scope? So what that's going to do is, if you don't want to print the entire screen or your settings, and you hit yes, it should just print the scope capture itself. We'll hit yes and just go to a PDF and see if that'll show us what it looks like. And I know it seems kind of harsh on this screen, but it would print that. Okay, so this is just the scope. I think I hit yes on saving ink, but it does print some of our other stuff and our scope settings. But if you notice, let me zoom all the way back out. It does not stretch it to fill the entire page. Maybe it just doesn't have the resolution. I'm not sure. But you may have some additional flexibility, whether you take a screenshot on your computer of this and then edit it. You can put some annotations. This software does not have an option for putting notes on the screen or highlighting certain areas. Now I can close this capture. Now I'm just going to open up one of my scanner captures, this 2009 Nissan. And so this one here, and this might have been what that scope capture was from. We have RPM, engine coolant temp, intake variable valve timing, and the solenoid percentages. So not a lot of information, not the full data list. But if I wanted just some of this information, if I was capturing too much and I don't really want to, print out that kind of information or share that information, then I can go to a custom list. We'll edit the list and we can deselect or select our PIDs. Say I didn't need the solenoids. Those data PIDs didn't show anything relevant. We don't want to confuse anyone, especially if we're sending information to, a service adjuster or a insurance adjuster. Oh, I guess that deselected it. We'll go the other way. So we can just limit our information of what's relevant to selling this work or what's important. we could export this screen. We could zoom in a little bit. Down here at the bottom, we can zoom in and out. And I think if we click, it'll zoom into that point. And also, wherever I click this cursor, which you can drag it around as well, but I just prefer to click where I want. If I put it right there at that peak, say I was graphing a mass airflow sensor, I looked at this and I said, okay, there's my peak for the mass airflow sensor, but what is my oxygen sensor doing at the time? And if I have a bunch of information on here, a bunch of different scope captures, I can look over at the left side of the screen. It updates that information with the current values where that cursor is across all channels. Let me find another capture that illustrates that a little better. So on this Ford EcoBoost, it has quite a bit of information over here on the left hand side. Now I can mix and match and move stuff around just by clicking and dragging. If you want to group your data in a different way, if I scroll using the cursor on the right, we can see that it highlights different information. It lets us know what part of the data list we're in. Once again, if I click and drop my cursor into a certain spot, it will update that information all the way across the board. If we don't like the way that this looks and we want to see more information, we can select a grid of 16. We can go all the way down to 1 data PID. There is quite a bit of flexibility here. So if we want to change some of the settings and change the way that this looks, there's a little dot or circle with a dot in it next to our bar graph here. If we open this up, we can change a bunch of settings. So we can go to a printer friendly version. It'll change a bunch of settings at once for us. It makes it nice and bright, save some ink. We can manually change them. Let me go back to that. And you can change the color of your graphs, change the color of the axes and the grid lines. So there are some flexible options here if you don't like the way it looks. If you have a vision problem where you can't see certain colors, you can change the colors to make it a little bit easier to see. The printer friendly version would probably help with that just because it's on a grayscale black and white. And if the scaling wasn't off and you couldn't really see what was going on, like say somewhere in the waveform you were at 5,000 RPM, but then you drop down to idle and you really want to see the idle fluctuations, I can go over here. Let me find the RPM if we have it. Engine RPM, and I don't want to auto scale it anymore. Let's say that I just want to display 600 RPM to 1200 RPM. Because how long are we below 600 RPM? We're really only there when the engine's off, and if we're on a test drive, then that should never really be happening. So as you can see here, I did exceed that value and we just chopped off the data. But if I wanted to focus in on this area, I can change the min-max scaling for that particular data PID. We'll switch it back to auto scaling, hit apply. It fixes it for us. So you can do a lot in this software that you can't do in the scan tool. And it really makes the most sense if you're, making notes, if you're printing out stuff to put it in the file, if you're sending information over the internet, to just go ahead and jump into ShopStream Connect, download the files off your scanner. Now, if I was to maintain my database a little more often and clear out my scanner, I have the option of removing all of these from the scan tool and putting them on my computer. Now, I would recommend maybe saving them to a cloud database or something where you're not going to lose them if your computer fails. But if I highlight all of these and hit copy to PC data folder, as soon as you install ShopStream Connect, it makes a folder on your computer for these waveforms. Now, I don't know how long this is going to take since I just selected everything, and I'm going to copy it over. And then, if you just needed that one file and the technician brings you the scanner, or you go to the computer, take that one file off, the scanner can go back to work. And then you can work on the computer. Someone else can be using the scanner as you're reviewing your information. So if you're in a shop that only has 1 or 2 scan tools, that is a viable option. Now I'm going to open this up in Windows File Explorer just because it's a little bit bigger and easier to see. because of my screen size, it's probably really hard for you guys to read these numbers over here on the side. So I'm going to open this up. We're going to go to my PC, Windows, and then there's a folder called ShopStream. Now I hope you guys can see that a little bit better, but we'll go there. And then it says Modis Edge files. So as soon as you plug in a different scan tool and copy them over, it's going to put another folder in here, which we'll see in a second, because I'm going to hook up my old Vantage, because I recently grabbed it to get some captures. I haven't used it in a while and wanted to make sure that I still knew how. It did take me a little bit to get going, but it'll make a new folder in here for the Vantage. And one thing you could do is, if you have a Google Drive or another cloud service, you could share this file to that drive. If you shared it among all your computers, at least the parent folder, the ShopStream Connect, then all that data is shared between all your computers, and it's a little easier to access. When you're done, you can just hit exit, unplug the cord, and power off your scan tool and put it back into service. Okay, so breaking out the classic, we got the Vantage Pro. Now, I haven't used this thing for quite some time. I had some guys asking about, getting around limitations of a single or two channel scope. So for one of my posts for this week, I used this lab scope instead of my Zeus or my Modis or the Pico scope, just because I know a couple of guys are using these, and I wanted to make sure that I was familiar with some of the options. And I did learn a few things. I didn't know exactly everything that it could do, so I did have to learn how to use those features. And one thing I do know is I need to change the clock. It thinks it is 1980. So if you haven't used this tool, it is a little bit limited in the data display that you have. I'm going to go in. There's only a couple of captures that have been saved. A couple of those are for me today, because I didn't know that you could actually save the captures easily and view them later on, or I forgot that you could on this old one. There may be a capture in here from an old Ford Taurus years ago, because I remember trying to use this and learning how to use this on a Ford Taurus with a cam sensor issue. But we have one I labeled today as a Subaru. And this was a starting system test I was doing on this particular one. I'll have to see if I can remember. But we can't see a whole lot of information. I do have my cursors turned on. We can turn those off. Turn the cursors off. I want to zoom out. And there we go. If we move the up and down button now, it moves our cursor right here on the screen. But we do have some limitations when we try to zoom in to that mark. You see how the mark moves off-centered? I may not be able to get my waveform centered in the screen like I want it. Let's try 32. That's going to zoom us out. Now that's pretty good. But if I just want to go over a little bit, I really can't. It jumps me over a complete frame. And I believe on my other capture, I had my trigger set incorrectly. I had it set on the falling slope instead of the rising slope. And it kept wanting to center up with this side of the waveform over here by my little plus sign where the trigger was. So it was very, very difficult to see. So I want to zoom into that spot and zoom out a little bit, zoom out a little bit. So that waveform is in a really bad spot. It's right on the seam of what I was capturing. So, it's very difficult for me to analyze that waveform. So we're going to go back to the home page. Go to settings. connect to PC, yes to continue. Now on this particular scope, it actually restarts the scope into a connect to PC mode, which basically makes it like a jump drive. I can't just take the memory card out of this one and plug it into a computer. It uses compact flash. So let's go ahead and power it up. Make sure that we're in connect to PC mode. So on top, we have to slide this cover over. And we're in connect to PC mode. We can jump back over to the computer. Now, like I said, this scope is a little bit slow. I mean, you can see my software version was 10.4. So that's the last time it was updated. I don't know if we ever updated it after we bought it, but you know, anything that's 10 years or older, you're going to have to expect to take some time. They're going to be a little slower, but I was surprised that it still connects. I can still download all my files. As you can see here on the screen, I have every file that we saw on the scanner itself, or the scope itself. Some are going to be screenshots, the ones that say BMP. So take a little bit to load here. And what I should probably do is I should probably just, once it lets me select and highlight them, I'll just highlight them, I'll copy them to the computer, and then we can access them. So now that they're in the PC data folder over here, I just navigated over there. They should open up very quickly. So this one here, I can open it up. Can I not expand that? It's about the same size as the preview, but this is just a capture that I took at some point. It says 2013. So that when you do a screenshot, it actually takes a screenshot of the entire screen, and you can see the little red battery icon there. That's pretty typical of this tool. And then my options are print preview, and open in Paint. So if we open this in Paint, can we expand it? No. That's just our canvas. There we go. Now, if this looks familiar to you, then you've probably taken some classes with some instructors that have been around for a while, because some of those guys still have these captures and they're still good case studies and they still get used, and some of them still use this tool because it does a decent job. I mean, it's not terrible. It's not as high a resolution as some of the new tools, but if you're using Paint, like we opened up in here, we can see what our scope was. This was a screenshot that was taken, but if we wanted to put some notes on here, we could try to scribble some stuff or put a text box and do some typing. Let me close that out, and we will, don't save that. We don't need that information. I'm not sure what an MMP is, and I'm wondering if this was on that Taurus. No, it says amperage. Oh, I think this is a capture from the graphing multimeter. So I don't know if I was checking for draws and decided to save it. Go out of there, and then we'll go to the ones on the Subaru that I was just working on. So if I zoom out, if we're navigating from this screen, now it seems like it's a whole lot easier to navigate that waveform. I can put my cursor where I want it to, or where I want it to be, and I can change my zoom accordingly to where I have the waveform that I want to see. I can change the position of my waveforms vertically. Let me get that out of the way. We have our cursors. We can take some measurements. It looks like I might be off the screen here for my amperage. Yep, we exceeded the maximum limit. Let me click this. We see our channel settings. I was on a 500 millivolt scale. So 500 amps total. But it still measured the information. It says right here, cursor 610. So we were at 610 amps right there, even though it's not displayed on the screen. So that data is there. It's just hidden from us. I can drag cursor number 2 back over here and measure the middle of my waveform. And I'm measuring that green trace, but it's also measuring the yellow trace at the same time. So now that we have the waveform kind of looking how we want it, if we want to add some notes, then we have to take a screenshot of this. So if you have screenshot software where you hit the print screen button and it automatically saves a file of that image, then do that. If not, then if you press the Windows key, Shift S on Windows 10, it'll open up the snip and save software. And there's a couple options up here at the top. You can draw a box, you can draw a shape, or I normally use the Windows snip. And then wherever I put my cursor, see how it kind of highlights it and changes the color there? That means that it's going to take a screen grab of that entire screen. So I'll click it, and then it saves it to the clipboard. I can open this up, and then up here at the top we have some options to add notes to our waveform. Unfortunately, they don't have a text box writing. I don't have a touch screen on this computer, but my laptop does. So what I normally do is I have just a stylus pen that I use to draw on the screen. But if you're using a mouse and keyboard, you can, draw some squiggly lines and point at stuff. Or we can open this file in something else, like Paint, or if you have Photoshop, you can do that. But in Paint, at least we can add a text box. So Paint, we can click text and start typing something here, which we need a color that, isn't quite the same as our background. And you could make a bunch of notes if you're trying to save this for a customer or sending it in. Or even for posting on Facebook. It's very helpful if you add some notes to your captures so people know what things are. And we were just talking about that the other day in one of my live streams. So you can do that easily with the tools built into Windows. Use ShopStream Connect to get the files off of your scanner onto Windows, open them up in ShopStream Connect, get the capture that you want to see, take a screenshot, add some notes, and it makes it into a very professional looking capture, and makes it seem like you know what you're doing if you're presenting this to a extended warranty company or a customer. You can point out certain points of the waveform specifically if you're trying to ask for help on Facebook. And then one more thing you can do if there was too much information on the screen here, we can open up our scope settings and we can turn off one waveform. If you said, oh, that green waveform isn't relevant, we can turn that off, and then we have just my yellow trace of the starter solenoid activation. So we can change a few things. We can't change everything. I wish we could zoom in and out on the vertical scale, but that's not an option. We can change what we're seeing width-wise as long as we took the capture correctly, and we can put some cursors and get some measurements. But other than that, we're still a little limited on what we can do with the waveform after it's been captured. Now, I mentioned it in a live stream. If you open up ShopStream Connect and it says that there's an update but it won't update, then what you need to do is when you open it, right-click on the ShopStream Connect logo and then open that as an administrator or run as an administrator, and that will allow you to update your software as long as you have administrative controls on the computer you're using, which most of us do. Most of the time our computers aren't locked down and we're not in a corporate setting. But that kind of sums it up on ShopStream Connect and connecting the scan tools to ShopStream Connect. If you're using a Virus or a Zeus, by default, it uses almost identical to this whenever you go into your data manager and open up a waveform. That waveform that we're using in here, that waveform viewer where we can change the view a little bit, that's exactly how it is on my Zeus. I think the Virus is the same way. So on those systems, if you wanted to view it on another computer, you just have to select those files, send them via email or in a Google Drive, whatever it is, to a computer that has ShopStream Connect. You can open those files right back up and manipulate them in the same way we were just now. I hope this kind of explained why I use ShopStream Connect and how it could benefit you. If you guys have any questions or comments, put those down below. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe, click the bell. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.